welcome, welcome, welcome to the Art of Poetry. I'm back after a little hiatus. Oh, I feel great. And with me, very special guest and impromptu man, JP. And JP is a college alum friend, and we had some bonding the last few years through emails. It's a wonderful thing. JP Bradford is just outside of Ottawa in a little town. So, all the way from Canada. And we've got an international flavor with May Sarton. So, JP, welcome.
Thank you.
And what's the celebration for today? Well, it's May 2nd. So May Sarton's birthday is tomorrow. That's felicitous. And it's also May Day. Oh boy, those French, they're going at it. And it'll be International Women's Day coming up soon, and Mother's Day, and Cinco de Mayo. So we have a lot to celebrate, but most of all that we're still here. Two octogenarians facing each other in a kind of afterlife of poetry. Can poetry really save us? Well, we'll explore. I'm going to read just a quick stanza from May Sarton, who's our real special poet to look at today. Gestalt at 60. For 10 years, I have been rooted in these hills. The changing light on landlocked lakes for 10 years have called a mountain friend, have been nourished by plants, still waters, trees in their seasons, have fought in this quiet place for myself. What an interesting lady. What strikes you about her personality, JP?
155,000 things, but
yeah,
yeah, she seems to have been a very interesting woman. She was quite emotional. She had very, very, very deep, but at the same time emotionally fraught relationships. The longest one she had, when after they separated, they still stayed very close and in fact considered each other family. She was very, in a way, kind of intellectually separate from her poetry, but at the same time, part of it, which is kind of weird. But when you think of, I want to, at some point, make a distinction between, or a contrast really, between her and Mary Oliver. But one of the things I think that's really interesting is if you put your focus, and your focus is on the outside, and then you introspect on what you know on the outside with yourself, and emotionally, physically, intellectually, spiritually, it's kind of a healthy introspection. But if your focus is completely on what's going on in your mind, so if you look, think of a profile with vision coming out of your eyes and vision going out, that's the first part of what I'm thinking about. Somebody who actually pays attention to what's around them and then internalizes, as a poet we're talking, and then internalizes and so on. Think again of a vision, but now the vision goes from the eyes backwards to the back of the head, and everything that comes up is inside the head and somewhat related to what's outside. So there's a contrasting focus. And I think the health of the person, intellectually, spiritually, psychologically, and emotionally, is directly, that those are ways of understanding what's going on in a person and in their poetry. So
Another way of saying stylistic displacement, which is what the poet's internal mechanism contributes in displacing a little bit what everyone else would see naturally. Maybe there's a contrast with other poets, but let's see where this is going with her own feelings.
Well, I have a poem here, a number of them, but one, if you look at Mary Oliver, for example, Mary Oliver, one of her poems, if I can find it, I've got all my little pieces of paper here, yeah. This is one of her meditations on death. And it would be the kind of a person who, in my view, although Mary Oliver herself had some, as we all do, personal issues, she was more in the world and found it fodder for her introspection. And it made her a happier person. I find May Sarton a very kind of basically unhappy person.
There's a
Hopeful,
good
but
contrast right there, but being more out in the world in her perceptions is also a great contrast, I think. Does that affect the quality of the poetry? Maybe
well,
yes.
That's what I want to show you.
Good.
So here's the poem by Mary Oliver, and then I'll read one right afterwards by May Sarton, and we'll see if there's a difference. As for life, I'm humbled. I'm without words sufficient to say how it's been hard as flint and soft as a spring pond. Both of these over and over, and long pale afternoons besides. And so many mysteries, beautiful as eggs in a nest, still unhatched, though warm and watched over by something I've never seen. A tree angel, perhaps, or a ghost of holiness. Every day I walk out into the world to be dazzled, then to be reflective. It suffices. It is all comfort, along with human love, dog love, water love, little serpent love, sunburst love, or love for that smallest of birds flying among the scarlet flowers. There's hardly time to think about stopping and lying down at last to the long afterlife, to the tenderness yet to come, when time will brim over the singular pond and become forever, and we will pretend to melt away into the leaves. As for death, I can't wait to be the hummingbird. Can you? So that's Mary Oliver reflecting on death and a kind of rebirth, if you'd like.
And the tenderness that's displayed in that poem emotionally. How attached to the world she really is. Viscerally.
Yeah, not intellectually, but viscerally.
It's wonderful.
There's no barrier. Intellectual, we make barriers by intellectualizing, and that's what's here. She says, every day I walk into the world to be dazzled, then to be reflective.
Uh-huh.
Not to be reflective and then maybe be dazzled with my words, or dazzling with my words. So that's her. So May, she doesn't have exactly the same poem, but here's one about rebirth, which is what the Mary Oliver one was about as well. I remember the cold and the somber O's of November. No bird song in the marsh, not even at dawn, but only the crows loud and harsh. Like the trees were bare, and the chill on the air speaks of death. They are shooting the deer. In this time, in this place of the dying body, it is dark now at 4. We're pulled down to the earth. The O's of November in all times and all places, bringing the ancient rite, bring the snows of December. In all religions all over the earth, the candles are lit for rebirth.
I read it and wondered what she meant by the O's. Is that a repetition of O sound in the poem? Is that, I'm puzzled. It's the one thing in my reading of this book that left me kind of, I think, wondering what the puzzle is.
Well, for me it was the O, like, oh my God, oh.
Oh, good.
That's what it meant to me, but who knows what it could mean 150 things to different people, you know. But to me, what the contrast between that and Mary Oliver is, this is an intellectualization of what goes on in the earth. So instead of being dazzled and then reflective, the other way around, I'm reflective, and then, oh, by the way, I'll throw in some dazzle.
Yeah, and it's dark dazzle, man. It's really dark, isn't it?
Yeah, dark dazzle. That could be a new dance, Frank. We could write a rock song and call it the Dark Dazzle.
That's a good one. You're on, Dark Dazzle. And drawn down to the earth, pulled to the earth. That is so less hopeful of a picture of dying than Mary's. Mary's is so, in a sense, alive with nature and possibilities. And this is down a rabbit hole.
Yeah.
And no visceral.
Yeah, well, she seems to be, she's very visceral, but she's very removed from it. She's like not really gotten a grip, gotten a hold of herself in the sense that she really is in touch deeply with her feelings.
Right.
And in her personal life, you know, she used to have these freakouts. There was a famous, freak out in some restaurant in New York where she and her lover were having a fight. And she, you know, became a drama queen, threw a hissy fit, was basically asked to leave the restaurant all the time, shouting intellectual things at her lover. But the emotional pain behind it seemed to come second, even though it was the most prominent thing to other people who were experiencing it, whether it be the lover or people who were trying to eat their fancy meals.
And she talks about pain a lot. Pain in herself, but she's also sensitive to the pain suffered by others. And I was struck again by that as I read through her Gestalt. The second stanza. Okay, she's up there in New Hampshire. She's 60 years old, and I don't know, is that...
A mere baby.
Yeah, is that a transition point? You know, seasons of a person's life, 20, 40, 60, 80, I don't know. But whatever it was, what does Gestalt mean anyway?
Oh, Gestalt is, it comes from the philosophy of a defrocked Austrian monk named Franz Brentano, who said that every act of the mind intends an object. And so you can't separate things out into little pieces. And just the way the English analysts, like the A.J. Ayers and the Bertrand Russells of the world did, where they analyzed, do you mean this, do you mean that? No, Franz Brentano's idea was that everything is a whole. And so it became then Gestalt philosophy. One of the great Gestalt philosophers was a guy named Gabriel Marcel.
Uh-huh.
Gabriel Marcel was a French guy, and there was supposed to be, they're trying to make a rapprochement between I'm trying to answer your question, but I'm long-winded, so I guess you'd have to put up with it.
Long-winded is good.
So they were having this great rapprochement where A.J. Ayer, who was the head of the logical analyst, British tradition, and the phenomenologists and the Gestaltists were trying to integrate their two schools of philosophy, or at least to come to some accommodation. And so Gabriel Marcel was making the meaning of this, and the meaning of this, and the meaning of this, and the meaning, and AJR stopped him and he said, "What do you mean the meaning of this? Do you mean A? Do you mean B? Do you mean C? Do you mean A and C but not B? Do you mean B and C but not A? Or do you mean E with A but sometimes B but only sometimes and sometimes with C?" And all the kinds of things that an analytical mind would do. And Marcel got quite frustrated trying to answer his question, and he finally said, "AJ, if there were a piano here, I would play it for you. Gestalt is the whole, the undivided experience that you can't take pieces of. The meaning of it depends on the whole and is embedded in the whole, not the sum of its parts. It's more than the sum of its parts."
Thank you. That is just beautiful for a setup, because she's got so much going on here, and focusing on the pain that she feels and is confessional about gets very interesting. But then again, it can't be taken out as a piece. It has to be all 4 pages, which I'm not about to read. The second stanza. "I can tell you that first winter I heard the trees groan. I heard the fierce lament as if they were on the rack under the wind. I too have groaned here, wept the wild winter tears. I can tell you that solitude is not all exaltation, inner peace, where the soul breathes and the work can be done. Solitude exposes the nerve, raises the ghosts. The past, never at rest, flows through it." Sounds unhappy at 60.
Yep.
And in the mountains and the lakes of New Hampshire, and maybe something's bubbling up at that age. Who writes a 4-page poem on Gestalt? That's a compendium of everything. I don't know, maybe it's an epiphany as a poem. They happen that way, and then they transition follows. Anyway, it does for me in my life. There's that illumination, and I think a lot of poets experience that. Whereas Mary Oliver just seems so steady, so wonderfully umbilically connected to the world, the outer world, so that we can go to her, as you told me you did, often for solace.
Yeah, I did. I lived with a woman who's now dead. I've had 2 women in my life die. The second one was a professor of literature at Bucknell University for a while. And she came up here to Canada and became a professor at something called the Lycée Claudel, a French school. But she knew Mary Oliver, and she said that Mary was a very taciturn individual and liked her privacy, but had an almost preternaturally direct connection with nature when she was in it. And I remember we used to go for walks, and this woman would say to me, "You're not looking at anything. You're a great hiker. You can run up and down mountains and do all kinds of stuff, and you love being out in the bush, but you don't really pay very much attention." And I realized she's right. And slowly started to become more immediate in my connection with nature. And it was a very, very interesting shift in my consciousness, because I used to intellectualize, much like I think May Sarton used to. And now I walk for two reasons. One is to pay very big attention to whatever catches my eye or my ear. I have great relationships with birds and other animals who I think recognize me, but I can't ask them. But I have crows that come say hello and so on. And when I'm out west, ravens and orcas, certain whales. And
That's quite a switch.
but yeah,
And it took-
and the other reason I walk is for exercise, so I can make the two of them go hand in hand now. Before it was exercise, fresh air, the grand picture, but no attention to the immediate senses and beautiful things that I could say I was missing.
When
I
was
think
that?
May Sarton was locked in that for a while.
Uh-huh. And when was that in your life, that transition?
Well, it's kind of, I think the first time it became apparent to me was when I was in my, oh God, I guess I must have been in my late 50s.
Really?
Yeah, or maybe middle 50s. I can't remember. My wife and I were in a place on the coast of Mexico, and I used to be wired to my cell phone, and I'd pick my cell phone up, I'd walk around like, okay, always listening, always doing stuff, always being busy. And I walked out into the ocean to get a cell signal because I couldn't get it where we were on the shore. And she came out with me and she took it away from me. She said, "You know what? If I threw this away right now, what would you do for the rest of the day? Would you pay attention to the water you're in?
Wow.
Would you pay attention to those dolphins that are out there jumping up and down in the ocean?
That's a moment. That
you
is
feel
a
this?
moment,
Would you feel the
JP.
sand in your feet?"
Wow.
She said, "You take showers." We had a lovely place, and we took showers outside because of the climate, right? And I used to take my showers. I love the shower and love the feeling of the water on me. She said, "There you're paying attention. Here, this is a backdrop. All this lovely stuff that's around you is a backdrop for your little self-insulated world that you're bringing with you and projecting on to whoever and whatever's around you."
Boy, that's a moment. And we're going to take a 3-minute break, and we'll be back with some more explorations of personalities, of poets, including ourselves. JP is a songwriter, and he's been on a previous show singing, and now we've got a new, a new rock song that's going to come out of your guitar.
Yeah. What was it called? What was the group called again?
I forget. Oh boy.
The Dazzling Downers?
Yeah. Good deal. The Dazzling Downers.
The latest social media scam is yet another phishing scheme designed to scare Facebook users into sharing their login credentials. You receive an email that appears to come from Facebook and says your page has been disabled for violating Facebook terms. If you believe the decision is incorrect, you can request a review and file an appeal at the link below. Well, the message may also state that if you don't act in the next 24 hours, Facebook will delete your account permanently. The email includes a link that appears to lead to Facebook.com. However, if you hover over the link, you'll discover that it doesn't point to Facebook's website. If you click the link, you'll likely be taken to an official-looking page and prompted to complete a form and confirm your password, giving scammers all the information they need to hack your account. Instead, what you should do is log into your Facebook account directly to verify there's a problem. Never enter your login information on a third-party website. And remember, scammers love to target social media accounts, so fake alerts are not uncommon. You can read more about phishing scams at bbb.org.
Hey world, I have a quick message. It's about safe driving. All right, let's go. Anytime you're driving, have the seatbelt buckled tight. Both hands on the wheel and your phone out of sight. When not in your hand trying to text somebody back. Because if you do, your car might get smacked. The moral of the story, just put your phone down. The people on the road will stay safe and sound. Put your phone down, put your phone down. People on the road will stay safe and sound. Yeah.
And now, we're still in New Hampshire. Who wakes in a house alone wakes to moments of panic. Will the roof fall in? Shall I die today? Who wakes in a house alone wakes to inertia sometimes, to fits of weeping for no reason. Solitude swells the inner space like a balloon. We are wafted hither and thither on the air currents. How to land it? I worked out anguish in a garden without the flowers. The shadow of trees on snow, their punctuation, I might not have survived. I came here to create a world as strong, renewable, fertile as the world of nature all around me. Ambition as a poet. Of course, she also did a lot of other writing.
Yeah, 56 books. I mean, books, poetry, everything. It's like, you can't be alive. I mean, she wrote nonstop.
She wrote nonstop.
Yeah.
What is that drive? That is a cerebral drive, certainly, right? Ideas and also anguish. So she maybe finally unpeels her onion.
I think she got to the, I was going to just wax eloquent on what that drive is, but I think she did start to unpeel her onion. At the end of her life, she basically fell on a couple of things. One is the difference between sexual passion and love. And I think the difference between passion and love. And what I mean by that is, I guess I should read another poem at first because it is a poetry show, but what I mean by that is, I remember sitting around with my wife, who, as you know, Frank, has died 9 years ago.
Yeah.
We had a phenomenal marriage, and I remember looking at her one day and saying, damn, if anybody had told me that this is what love is, I would have been shocked. It's comfort.
Yes.
It's being yourself and being accepted just the way you are.
Just the way you are. Yeah, we love that phrase. So
not having to prove yourself.
So read that poem that resonates along that line.
Well, I don't know if she got there, but this is one. This is one about the loss of a love.
Ah,
And I could find another one, but I'll use this one now because this is where she feels that, at least to me, she's saying that emotional separation and loneliness, panic about the roof falling in on your head, that's quite a metaphor. Because if somebody's there, you don't have that panic usually. And it doesn't mean they can keep the roof from falling. It means that your life is falling apart. Anyway, that loneliness and emotional separation is worse, much worse than physical pain. It goes, the poem is this. I used to think pain was the great teacher, but after 2 years of trying to learn its lessons, I'm hoping my teacher will go away. She bores me almost to death. She's so repetitive. The pain I meant is the pain of separation, the end of love. That lesson is never learned and it's never boring. Only a kind of desolation, like a crow cawing. Like a crow cawing in the depth of winter. Memory is merciless. So she's saying that physical pain, I can deal with it. It gets boring after a while. Over and over the same stuff. But the loss of a deep love is there. And unless you put yourself back together, she doesn't say this, but unless you, I'm speaking now from experience, but unless you put yourself back together somehow, it will caw at you like a crow in the depth of the winter of your life, and it will be merciless.
and those crows, you know, they have such a distinctive sound.
They're so smart too. They're amazingly smart animals.
Very smart, yeah.
So in metaphor, the smartness of the crow will find a way to eat into you no matter what. You could write 56 books or 72 poems a minute to get it out, but if it's still in there and you haven't really dealt with it, it's still going to be there eating you.
That is such a strange image too, because it's as if somehow that kernel of initial hurt or loss or whatever is in there for life and festers, and most artists, or I won't generalize, some artists like me go back to it occasionally and see if it's still there, and if it is, try to work on it through another expression of a poem, a novel. She wrote a big novel at 75, and that is quite a life of production. It's worth noting again. I don't know if the word driven is right, but so motivated to be either noticed, or I wonder what her, without getting into psychology.
We have to, Frank. I'm a psychologist.
I know, but without getting into armchair, because you're much better than that. But it was like, oh, okay. Do you know anything about her parents?
No, I don't know anything. I'm struck by the image of being driven. Because it's
Yeah.
always struck me that when one is driven, in the sense of psychologically driven, usually it means that I can't stop doing something, I must do it. It's that kind of sense. But for me, driven is that, when you're driven somewhere, you're not in the driver's seat, somebody else is driving you.
Uh-huh.
And so, what is it that's driving you?
Yeah.
Not you, it's something in you. And what is that in you that's driving you? Well, it's either fear or love.
Yeah.
And fear is pain.
Yeah.
Love is conquered pain, transformed pain. So she wrote this very small thing that kind of speaks to that. It's called a thought. It's the steamroller that crushes a butterfly in its path has not won anything, only destroyed something. Brute power is not superior to a flower.
Well, that's quite the mature view. I mean, you read several poems from the book Coming into 80. And
That's the only book I got, yeah.
I'm delighted you got those, Coming into 80. And she kind of opens up like a flower, a vulnerable flower, for me in this book in the nicest way. She had a friend or two or three or four who had problems. And it's so beautiful that she expresses her compassion and her empathy in this book. When I first met her 20, 30 years ago as a poet, I was enthralled, taken with her. But I don't know, this book speaks more directly to me. After the long enduring, for Charles is one of her friends who died. After the long enduring, the agony of staying alive with AIDS inside you, you who noticed everything with wide open eyes, the veins in a leaf or a wrist, ladybird on a grass blade at rest, they told me, Charles is blind. Blind is what they said. Remember the salamander you found in the bird bath one summer? A vermilion streamer? The solitary doe at dusk stamping and huffing in the luscious field? Rilke tells you with great tenderness, Ein Blick, my friend, inwardness, insight. Wow. That's so Mary Oliver to me.
Yes.
It is.
Yeah, she started to break into, there were some major changes, I thought.
Yeah. And
Sorry.
and also for Charles, so present in your absence, you will always be walking down the grassy path toward me, tall and smiling, not under the cruel spell that had taken you away, blind and spent after the excruciating battle. You will always be holding my little dog tenderly in your arms. You will always be here with me as long as I live, a towering figure of love. What a bond she had with this fellow.
Yeah.
And it speaks to the depth of her relationships, I think, which surprises me.
Well, she stayed, who was that woman, Mary, somebody that was her lover that she broke up with?
Oh, I don't know the name.
Anyway, they were together for a long time and then she broke up and they stayed as family until until death.
Well,
But you know, in some of the indigenous cultures, the one I'm thinking of right now is in South Africa, but also in North America. They make a distinction between being old and being an elder. You know, you can be an old fart and you're just an old fart. But if you're an elder, you're somebody that has something to say.
oh yes, so revered in that culture, and I didn't get as close to the culture as I wanted. I was 8 years in South Dakota and attended a Sundance in the summer, but it almost turns our society on its head, which reveres youth and fast-paced life, missing what's in the backyard.
Yeah.
And the poets, what do they do for us? What do Mary Oliver and May Sarton and the poets who sometimes suggest an alternative lifestyle, alternative patterns, certainly with nature at the center. Can poetry save our society in America, which has gone cuckoo?
More than cuckoo. More than cuckoo.
Yeah.
Are you asking me that question, or is that rhetorical?
Well, it's both. Any thoughts on on how poets have changed your life?
Oh, my dad was a poet, and my
Good.
dad read poetry for a living.
Yeah.
And top-rated radio show in New York, which was, among other things, a poetry show. And so I was raised with poetry in my house. So asking me how it's changed my life, it's built into me. But formal poetry, not so much. I mean, Mary Oliver, I read poetry, sometimes it touches me, sometimes it doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
But use of language and use of language to integrate experience with the psychological, the emotional, the spiritual, and the physical, that's something that I revere and I cherish. And the word cherish to me means much more than love. I cherish that. And I lament that we're losing that as a society, at least in North America. It was not so bad in Canada, but it's getting there. And not so bad as in the States, but it's getting there. The Inuit, for example, in their culture, Inuit, you would say, Inuit is how they say it. Inumari is a revered elder, whether you're male or female, you're called Inumari. And how do you know you're Inumari, not just an old person? Because of the way you use language.
Uh-huh.
Does it touch another person's soul? Does it summarize wisdom in a way that makes you think twice or feel differently? Feel differently is when you touch, you're feeling differently, feel different. Anyway, it's a very interesting thing. In my house, when I was growing up, language was very important. Not just grammatical, but expression, a way of expressing everything about your life. And so I lament that a lot. But to answer the question, Right now, I think if you ask 100 people, has poetry touched your life? If you got 4 to say yes, you'd be lucky. If you got 2 to say had a profound impact, you'd be even luckier. So I think we're in a society where it's no longer, it's kind of like a minor thing. Unless you count song, and then it starts to become a little bit different, but then the music and the words together are the poetry, and then it does touch emotions, but does it do anything to integrate at that higher level of spiritual, intellectual, emotional integration? I'm not so sure.
And certainly it is poetry. Lyrics have really taken their place and influenced so much in society that it's wonderful to include. So Bob Dylan, for example, it's just not the old traditional way of looking at poetry that maybe something like Poets in the Schools tried to affect in local schools. I think that was a humanities program for a while, where they sent poets into the schools, probably middle grades, as an influence. But then again, so much of the cultural compendium and canon is essential in a way to education, to understanding, who Homer was.
Right.
I mean, that loss is overwhelming. And of course, school systems have their job cut out for them, but wow. What about the Great Books course? Did you ever have one in college?
What college did I go to again?
Yeah, which one?
I don't think we did. No, we had some interesting English teachers, but we never had a great books course.
I found that missing at Fairfield in 60 to 64. It would have been an easy jump, easy leap into a great books of Western. The closest thing was Petrie's Western Civ,
Yep.
part 1 and part 2. But at Wesleyan, when I was a special student, because I had flunked out of RPI as a whatever, I was dreaming of being into the transition to Fairfield, so I'm a 5-year man. That wonderful semester at Wesleyan, spring of 60, before I entered Fairfield, was second half of a great books course. Whoa! Oh! From Dante up, just blasted my cobwebs away, helped me to open books with a passion and understanding. So, what's happened,
Oh, this is old men lamenting right now.
Yes.
The other thing I can't wrap my head around it very well is rap and hip hop. They tell me it's poetry, but it doesn't. It's all about. I don't know. It doesn't resonate with me. But I was going to get out this Mary Oliver.
Oh, wonderful. Mary. Let's go back to Mary.
It's called Mindful. I think I read this last time on this show, but anyway. it's again, anyway, you'll hear it and see what you think. Every day I see or hear something that more or less kills me with delight, that leaves me like a needle in the haystack of light. It's what I was born for, to look, to listen, to lose myself inside this soft world, to instruct myself over and over in joy and acclamation. Nor am I talking about the exceptional, the fearful, the dreadful, or the very extravagant, but rather of the ordinary, the common, the very drab, the daily presentations. O good scholar, I say to myself, how can you help but grow wise with such teachings as these? The untrimmable light of the world, the ocean's shine, the prayers that are made out of grass.
She's such a singular voice, truly.
Yeah.
Really does capture
Yeah.
the soul and the feelings of being fully alive, viscerally, emotionally.
Yeah.
Well,
May, I mean, she gets her inspiration from her cat.
yes,
You know that poem?
I do.
For 2 years, the great cat imagination slept on, she says.
Yes.
Then suddenly the other day, what had lain dormant woke to a shower, a proliferation of images. My Himalayan cat sits on the terrace wall, back to the sea, his blue eyes wide open, alive to every stir of a leaf, every wing in the air, and I recognize him as a mage. After long silence, an old poet singing again, I am a mage myself. Joy leaps to my throat. Glory be to God.
That's such a beauty. Joy leaps to my throat. And when I read that at home, I thought, well, you're not really feeling it unless you're feeling the joy choking you, jumping into your throat.
Yeah.
She also wrote, I wanted poems to come. I wanted poems to come running and leaping. All they did was dream while I was sleeping. In the dreams I could leap and run, feeling no pain. It was healing and resolution. I was given my life again.
Isn't that interesting though, Frank? Because here, Mary's all about the prayer of leaves and the wind and the sensate, everything being her emotional and intellectual and spiritual strength. May is about things that stimulate her mind to write poetry, and that's where her joy is.
Yes.
Is the old internal versus external thing again.
Yes. That was a beautiful contrast, I think, between the two. You teased them out just beautifully. And you know, enough of the little tidbits about biography and how there are similarities, both lesbian, both with partners. Mary Oliver had a real deep, long-term, wonderful relationship up in P-Town for the longest time. So I think you really did them up well. Thank
Well,
you. And now we're about to close. But before I levitate, I love your point about the elder, but the elder who's an Inuit, and that's the name of the tribe up in Canada, right? Yeah.
It's the ones we used to call them Eskimos, right?
Right.
So the Inuit and the elder that is a real elder is called Inumarit. It's a word in their language. The language is Inuktitut, and it's Inumati, which means one who uses words profoundly.
Profoundly. Well, thank you for the poets. And thank you, JP, for, wow, the most comprehensive gestalt treatment of the subject imaginable. This was so pleasant and tender in many ways, an understanding of deep feelings, bringing a few tears to my eyes in my dotage.
Our dotage.
Our dotage. Happy 80, buddy.
Yeah,
Well,
same to you.
here we go. I want to go like Mary Oliver. Really. Diaphanizing, just sort of melting.
And thank you, Frank, for your loving presence.